Unicorns and glitter and taxidermy critters are just some of the things they like. They also enjoy 80s hair bands, Grizzly Adams and John Goodman, so if you think that's weird then you can take a hike. But the things they enjoy the most are making art and cracking jokes, so without further ado, here are your hosts. You've got your two artsy gals, your two artsy gals. Here are your two artsy gals.
Hey, I'm Katie.
And this is Sharon.
And welcome to the Two Artsy Gals podcast. This week we are going to talk about stamp carving and how you can make your own stamps and use them to do really cool shit. I thought we'd start off by talking a little bit about how we were each introduced to it or what experience we have with actually doing this. And Sharon, before we started, you were saying that you did a little bit of printing, block printing.
Yeah, in college, most of my experience with carving and stamping, so to speak, was with block printing.
So can you explain a little bit to our listeners what that actually is?
Yeah, so what I used, there's lots of different things that you can do, but they were wood blocks with linoleum adhered to them, and we would use carving tools. Some of the carving tools would be shaped like little V's, were mostly like what we would have that had very sharp ends. Mm-hmm. And so you could carve out, basically draw with the carving tool to make the negative space. Okay. And then you would cover that block after you'd finished carving it with a really viscous ink, and you would lay the paper on it, and then you would roll it through a press. It was almost like a pasta press.
Oh, cool! Yeah,
but it was like on a table. It was really big, so a really big area. And the other thing that you could do with that to do multiple colors with it, you could do multiple stamps. So maybe you would just carve the background and then you would carve another layer to add to it. Maybe you'd have a face and you would just do really basic, and then you'd carve the eye on a different block.
I have a friend who did that at a class she took at PCC, and I was a little bit mind boggled by how hard it was to do the different colors. Like she had trouble with it, but she was like, yeah, you just carve out each. And I'm like, oh my God, how do you know what to do?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we did a few of those. It was really challenging, but it was really fun.
That's cool. That's awesome. I've never done anything like that, but I use them on more of a smaller scale. I think the first time I ever heard of stamp carving or even did any stamp carving was, when I joined this art group. Gosh, it's been about 3 years ago. It's like an art swap group, and they swapped stamps. And I was like, what? And so someone told me how to do it, and I looked some stuff up online. But I've kind of fell in love with it. I really it's fun. I like to do it. Yeah, that's what I use it a lot for artist trading cards, and I use them in my mixed media art too. So especially mail art or stuff like that when I'm doing postcards.
What material are you using to carve your stamps?
I use, and we'll get into the material a little bit more here in a minute, but I use this stuff called Easy Car or Speedy Cut. I think there's also one called Easy Car, but Speedy Cut I use because, we'll just get into it now. We'll get into the tools we need because, I fucking hate the linoleum blocks. I bought my linoleum, and I'll post pictures of the linoleum and the Speedy Cut on our blog, but I bought mine not adhered to blocks, which I think is part of the reason that it was so hard to work with, but it's also, even adhered to blocks, the linoleum is it's hard. It's a hard material. It's basically like the backside of a linoleum tile or something is kind of what it feels like. It's like hard, dried clay.
It's really crumbly when you work with it.
And it's really, it's easy to slip with the tool, and I have cut the shit out of myself with the tool. I even actually I asked my uncle to make it for me and he never did, but I designed like a little jig to set stamps in when you carve them.
Mm-hmm.
So that, because what I was doing is you have to hold it still with your
Mm-hmm.
hand. So you're holding your material and then you're carving and then whoosh, it slips and I was jabbing the carver into my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and everybody I know who uses this crap does it. It's not just me and my clumsiness that I suffer from anyway, but no, it's hard to work with. I don't like it. I do have some examples that I'm going to post of stamps that I've carved from the linoleum. And the reason that I bought, if you want to try using the linoleum, or the lino blocks is what they'll be called, in most of your art supply stores or online. The reason that I bought it not adhered to blocks is because it's quite a bit cheaper that way.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually glue it to your own blocks of wood or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. So, but it's pretty cheap, again, as I said, and I think you expressed this too. It's just kind of hard to work with. So,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're learning. And I think also it's stamping with this stuff is a little bit more involved to me. It feels like like I told you just now, I prefer to use Speedy Cut. I think there is another brand, like I said, but the Speedy Cut is made by Speedball, and it's almost like a Mars plastic eraser, or those white erasers, and this stuff cuts like butter. Like, it's so much easier to use. The first time I used it, my friend Cindy, I went down to visit her where she lives in California last year, and she had some, and I was like, oh my god, why have I not been using this all along? Like,
Yeah.
really, it is so much easier to use. I think it's safer. So in the Speedy Cut, you can find that at, I haven't ever seen it at like a Joann's or a Michael's,
Mm-hmm.
but I've seen it at Blick a few times, but I usually generally order mine from Amazon or something. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and so along with those things, and you can also actually, I'll try to find some examples of this. I've seen people who've used styrofoam.
Huh.
Like they carve out styrofoam, or even like those styrofoam cups or lids, you can draw in it
Oh, yeah.
and make the dents or whatever. And I've seen people use that for stamping. Like, you can use anything. You can carve fruit.
Yeah, and potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually have to be these things that we're talking about to do your own stamps. But when you are using these, and I don't know, maybe when you're using other things too, there is a tool. It's called a linoleum cutter, and you can get it. Mine is made by Speedball, but I think there's probably generic off brands too.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what these look like. It's just, you open up the end, there's a lid on the end, and there's like little bits that you would put in it, and some of them are like, there's a really deep V, there's a really wide V, there's a little tiny one that you use probably for making lines, and there's a square cut one and more of a round cut one, and then there's a flat weird looking bit that's just made to cut the linoleum or the easy carve. And you can just experiment with them. I don't really know like which bit is what, or if there are even specific names for them, but you can, if you type linoleum cutter into your search engine, you'll find them easily. And you just, you put the blade that you want to use in the end of the little knife guy and just go to town. Start cutting. That's really the only tool you need. So yeah, you need relatively few tools. You do, like you mentioned, the viscous inks and stuff. So if you're going to use, some people like to use like a brayer, which is just like a roller, like a little rubber rolling pin thing. It's used for printing. And the inks, I have some of the inks that I bought. I accidentally got the water soluble inks, and I don't really like those. They are really sticky, and they take a really long time to dry.
Oh.
So they take way longer. As a matter of fact, I think that I have had to mail art like that I've done for swaps, and I've done a stamp carve in. I think I've had to mail stuff without it dried all the way because I was missing a deadline, and this is like by 4 or 5 days of waiting sometimes.
Wow.
So it's just the water soluble stays sticky and weird, and I never feel like it dries well, and I feel like it smudges even after it's dried. So if you're going to go that route, I would definitely recommend getting the oil-based inks.
Mm-hmm.
So, but really quickly, just a little tutorial of how, like you described a little bit when you were doing your block printing, how you would do that and how I use those inks in my office. I actually have a microwave, a glass plate from the inside of an old microwave that I saved that I like to use because it's smooth and you can see how thick you have the ink on there. And I just, you squirt a little bit on there and you roll it out nice and flat and you roll it until your brayer is covered. And then you would roll it across your stamp. And then you put your piece of paper over the top of it. And then I have another harder brayer that I like to roll over it with. Some people use a wooden spoon and just rub it. So you don't have to have a brayer to do that part. And then you very carefully peel the paper off and let it set and dry.
So are you ever using just regular like rubber stamp ink?
I prefer that. Now that I have discovered the Easy Carve and I prefer using that over the linoleum, I just I like rubber stamp ink better. I think it's easier to work with. Sometimes I use paint on them. Sometimes I'll paint the back of the stamp and stamp it that way. But I definitely prefer, it's just easier. It's less messy. There's less to clean up. It's less for me to get on my clothes and ruin them because this is how you do.
Right. So so there's lots of different options for ink application or, you know, how to get that image onto the piece of paper.
Yeah, and I've been lately, what I really like doing with carved stamps is I like to use the clear, like the clear embossing pad ink. Or the embossing ink. I have a big fat one. I think this one's called a Big Bossy. And I like to, it's the clear ink and I dip my stamp in that and then I put it on whatever I'm stamping and then I sprinkle embossing powder over it. And hit it with the heat gun. Nice. And it makes that stamp raised up. It's really cool. And I'll put some examples of doing that because I like to do that when I sell my art. I have a little thank you thing that I do on an artist trading card size piece of paper. And it's a little skull with the teeth that spell out thank you. And I always do that embossed. I just think it's cool looking. And it adds some texture and visual interest to artwork when I'm doing it. So, but you know, actually more having... I think I got most of my embossing powders from you when you were still selling Stampin' It Up stuff. So can you talk a little bit how you do embossing with the stamping stuff so that
sure. So basically you just use you can use a clear ink. It doesn't have to even be clear. It can be a colored ink. And usually they're a little stickier. They're like a sort of a specific ink.
I was going to ask that. It is embossing ink. You can't just go get a regular ink pad.
You can, but the embossing powder just doesn't stick to it as well, and you won't get as nice of a raised image. Okay. So, you know, when you tap it off, you'll probably tap off too much if it's not an embossing ink. Gotcha. But if you use, the ink that's just a little bit stickier for the embossing powders to adhere to, then you just get a nicer, crisper image. Okay. So, and then one of the things that I do after embossing, so I'll use the embossing ink, stamp my image, pour the embossing powder on it, shake it off, and then maybe just even tap the piece of paper. And if there's still just little loose pieces so that I get a crisper image, I'll dust it off with a really fine paintbrush.
That's a really good idea because I have ended up with little extra spattery stuff that you miss on the paper. So
so I'll flick that piece of paper and then also just brush it off with a little bit with the paintbrush.
Okay. And what is that? Is it like a kind of plastic or? Yeah, it's just little, like powdered plastic. Basically?
I think basically a little. It's because when you feel it, feels like plastic. Okay. Yeah, I think it is basically.
Yeah, and then you melt that with your heat gun and.
Yeah, just melt it with your heat gun and then, just let it dry for a few minutes because it'll be kind of tacky right after you do hit it with the heat gun.
Yeah, and also, just a warning, the paper is hot after you hit it with a heat gun sometimes. So
yeah. I used to do that before I had a heat gun don't do this out there, listeners. I would turn on the burner on my stove at home. This was like before I had ever moved out of my parents' house, and I would put it over the burner.
Like, so the burner was heating the underside of the paper, or would you turn it over and...
It was on the underneath side.
Oh my gosh, did you catch them on fire ever?
Mm-mm.
Did your parents see you do that and think,
Oh yeah,
like,
they
what
would
the
watch
fuck?
me do it.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. That's so funny. My dad was convinced one time, kind of off topic, but just weird shit that you used to do at home. Do you remember friendly plastic?
Yes.
I used to make beads and jewelry out of friendly plastic when I was in high school. My dad was always convinced that I was going to ruin our pots and pans.
Mm-hmm.
And you just dip it in boiling water. It's not touching anything. Like, I'm not cooking it.
Yeah.
So I always used to have to do it when my dad wasn't home, because he would be like, "You're going to ruin our pots and pans." I'm like, "No, I'm not. Watch this. It's fine." So,
friendly plastic. I don't even know if they sell that anymore, do
they
they?
actually do. I found it online in a couple places and been very tempted to buy it, but
Oh my god.
what would I do with friendly plastic? I could do a million things with it, actually. But
Right. You can make a whole bunch of 80s
exactly.
jewelry and magnets.
Oh god. Magnets. Oh geez.
Maybe some headbands. Who knows?
I know. I think I even made like weird crap, like little cat-eyed things to hook onto my sunglasses at the time. Oh my god, I wish I could find those.
Oh my god.
But anyway, back to stamp carving.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's just the basics of stamp carving. So, and there are a lot of there are a lot of cool things you can use them for. I mentioned I like to do like thank you cards to my people who buy my art. I have a few different thank yous. I have some for thank you postcards that I like to mail out to people. Like, especially I actually started doing this when I was in graphic design school. We used to, for some classes, we would have to go find, you had to research and find a graphic design firm or a graphic designer in town and then go interview them, which I always hated doing. But I always felt like I should, like, you know, they're giving their time to you. So I always tried to make like a cool card and send it out to say thank you. So that's why I have my big thank you stamp. And I have done my stamps. I use stamping a lot in mail art because it's so easy to stamp a postcard size stamp over like collage that you've done or painting or background stuff that you've done, and then you just stamp over it and it adds an extra layer of interest, and it's just really cool. So
yeah,
I like to do that. And I've used it in art pieces that I've done. So I don't know. What did you use your, like, were you stamping posters or shirts or?
With block printing?
Yeah, with the block printing.
Oh, we used a special paper. It's been so long. But I mean, they were big images, you know, like that we would hang on the wall or, yeah, we never did t-shirts or anything.
Cool. That's actually, I accidentally brought up t-shirts. I didn't even think of that, but you can use them to stamp fabric too. So, like that might actually, well, this is going to be coming out way after Mother's Day, but Mother's Day is on my mind because Mother's Day is tomorrow. As we're recording this, Mother's Day is tomorrow, but you could even do like, you know, get an apron and stamp cool stuff on it for your mom or for yourself or, you know, or like I said, t-shirts, you can stamp t-shirts. You can do all kinds of stuff with that.
Yeah.
Kind of neat.
Yeah.
Actually was thinking about, stamping fabric just to sew with.
Oh, yeah.
Like doing an offset pattern and carving a stamp and stamping a print on it, or even just a border print on something that like a skirt that you've made, or you could
it'd be really
print.
Also fun for kids projects too, like even making like little placemats napkins that kids could do. They could easily carve little things out of potatoes, you know, like we had talked about.
And, you know, I want to say that I did that like at 4-H camp or church camp or something that I did when I was a kid, or maybe even 4-H. We carved potatoes and stamped things with them. Those were always so cool. I liked that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was fun to do. I remember when I got so excited when my son used to come home with stuff like that. But I feel like they don't do as much arts and craft in school as they did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was shocked when my kindergartner, well, he's not a kindergartner anymore, but he came home with homework in kindergarten. I was like, what? Why do they have homework? It's fucking kindergarten. What are you talking about?
I know.
That's crazy. Oops, I hope
Yeah.
no one heard that. But yeah. Well, I guess, you could also, really, anything that you would do with rubber stamps, you can do with carved stamps.
Mm-hmm.
You could make your Christmas cards every year, birthday cards, like anything like that you can do. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you can buy, like I said, it doesn't have to be that weird sticky liquid ink. You can just get, like, I use stamp pads now.
Yeah.
So, and you can get stamp pads in different sizes too. Sometimes you run into trouble, like some of my stamps are pretty big. So I kind of have to stamp half of them at a time. Oh, that's one thing that I wanted to talk about too that I forgot is different ways of transferring images onto your stamp.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I usually just freehand draw what I want on my stamp. I have a friend who just sits down and starts carving without drawing anything. Just to see what had happened. Most people I know freehand draw, but you can also transfer images like with carbon paper.
Right.
You can do that, or, I suppose you could use like one of those lights where you trace it onto, but again, most people I know just freehand draw. But if you're not comfortable doing that, carbon paper is probably the easiest way to do it. Although, I've been having trouble finding carbon paper lately. I guess I'm going to have to go to the office supply store and look for it, because I was looking for it for, I don't even remember what the hell I wanted it for now, so I must not have needed it very badly. But yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. And I actually have a friend who took some of her kids' artwork and transferred it onto rubber stamps and made rubber stamps out of them.
Oh, cool.
It was really cute. It was so neat. She, like, her son drew like an elephant and a bird, and so she transferred the images onto stamps and made rubber stamps for him he just thought they were the coolest things ever. And I think they made cards for like his grandma or something like that, but it was just neat. She had a whole set of like kid art that she had transferred onto that, so
that's awesome.
It was a really sweet idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think this is going to be a short episode. We keep running out of stuff. Well, we're getting there. We're getting close to the end. Anyway, so yeah, this will be a little bit shorter than we usually run, but I think it's a basic project. It's a pretty easy project. It doesn't have to be elaborate, and it's kind of a cool rainy day thing to do too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes when I'm just like, I want to make something, but I don't want to get like, I don't want to start a huge project. You just need to just kind of sit down and carve some stamps and maybe do stuff. And again, I was actually going to ask you if you'd ever, because I mentioned artist trading cards. Have you done much of those in the past?
I've made some, but not with stamps.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we should do an episode on those sometime. But I've not really been that into them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess that's stamps in a nutshell. I think we're done. But if you have any suggestions on stamp product or projects that we could do with stamps, or something really cool that you've done with a stamp that you want to share with us, you can always email us at 2artsygals@gmail.com. We would love to hear any ideas or suggestions on this topic or any other episode ideas that you have. Things that you'd like to have us research and talk about would be great. And we will have images posted, as always, on our blog, corresponding pictures. And I actually, if I have time this week, I'm going to try to do a little stamp carving video tutorial. So hopefully that'll be up. So just go check out our blog when this episode comes up. It's 2artsygals.wordpress.com. You'll find all kinds of cool stuff there. Sharon and I have bios up there. Yeah, so you can find out a little bit more about our podcast and why we do it, too. And you can also find us on Facebook. We have a page, 2artsygals. You can go like us there, and sometimes we ask questions. We announce new episodes and topic ideas. And you can also now subscribe to us on Stitcher Radio with the Stitcher free Stitcher app, and listen to us there, and you'll always have updates of new episodes, as well as iTunes. You can subscribe to us there. And sometime we might tweet. But I'm not even going to give our Twitter account information because I don't tweet ever. So I suck at it. I'm getting old. I don't understand the Twitter and the tweeting. It's so weird. I just hate being limited to those few words. Because clearly I like to talk. So, oh my god. All right. That's enough snorting. So, I guess we will talk to you next week. So, until then, bye.
Bye-bye.